So, hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be talking to some of the cast members of the series House of Ho. We are joined today by family members Washington, Lesley, Judy, and also new cast members Bella and Kim this season. And Washington, Lesley, and Judy, I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the initial genesis of this show and where that relationship with the producers of the show initially came from. You know, what was it that initially sparked their interest in stepping into your family and really capturing so many of the elements that we've come to know and love as audiences?
You know, I think a lot of it had to do with being in the right place at the right time. The movie Crazy Rich Asians was, released in August of 2018. It did really well, and Warner Media was behind that production. So I'd always had a dream to, be on reality TV, but I wanted it to be with my family. I was inspired by, the Kardashians and the success that it brought to their family. And I thought there was an opportunity. Once I saw Crazy Rich Asians success, I called a few people I knew in Hollywood. And, luckily I knew that we had a beautiful family, an inspiring story from my parents. I knew we all had kids that were named after presidents that would pique other people's interest. And we were just celebrating our own American dream. And I think it was inspirational at the time.
Absolutely. And it is one of those things where it feels like everybody in the family had to be on board for having a camera crew come in and capturing all of your lives in the way that they have. And so I also wanted to ask a little bit about what were some of the initial questions that you were talking to the producers about, some of the questions that you had individually or as a family about what the experience of being on a reality show was going to be like, because, it's not just showing up to a location, it's having the cameras in your individual homes, and they're at a lot of really key family moments and vulnerable moments that we've seen as well.
I felt like if any family was prepared for the cameras, it was my family. We have worked together as a family, since we were kids, and always taught how to perform in different meetings or situations, and nothing would scare us. But when I went to my family, nobody thought it was going to happen. So it was easy for them to sign up for the show. It wasn't until the 18-wheeler started pulling up with video cameras that I felt redeemed. I didn't think it was going to happen either. But ever since it's happened, our family's been closer than ever. We're really proud.
I love that. And what was that experience for you in the early stages, Judy, and kind of what made you feel comfortable in saying yes to Washington's idea when this all started to come together?
Washington sold it to me as this was a show about him, and that I was just going to be in the background. So I just had to sign this release, and they wouldn't really care about what I had to say or do. I signed on just thinking like, oh, this will be a fun family project. But, once they started asking more invasive questions, and I happened to be going through a divorce at the time, I realized once I signed on, I would have to be like in it. So at that point, I decided, I'm going to put everything out there in the open and hope that there are other people that are going through something similar and that they could relate to me.
Absolutely. And for you, Lesley, as well, like Judy said, if Washington was pitching this as a show initially centered around him, did you have any particular questions or things that you wanted to know before saying yes? Because it's about, the two of you as a couple being in the show, but also you're saying yes for your kids in this instance as well.
Right. Yeah. So when he pitched the show, I felt like we lived really boring lives, and we weren't going through much marriage problems at the time. It was bubbling here and there, but the kind of the breaking point of our, like the pivot, the fork in the road in our marriage happened 2 weeks before the camera crews actually came in. And even then I wasn't open to the producers because that was so scary to, I hadn't even really let it sink in what was happening and how much effort and how much of myself I would have to give to the cameras. And so it started bleeding into the scenes, I think about episode 4 or 5. And that's when we had to go back and kind of pivot the story a little bit. And that was when, everything came out. But yeah, it was difficult at first. Yes. Cause I didn't feel like our lives were that interesting anyways. And And look what it is now.
2 seasons in. And Bella and Kim obviously coming into the show new, with what Judy and Lesley were just saying about realizing, that this was going to capture certain things that they hadn't anticipated in their lives. I was interested in some of the conversations that you had with them and the rest of the family about what the experience of filming had been like, and, kind of what details you were interested in knowing before you stepped in front of the cameras for the first time in this season.
Well, I would say I'm a pretty private person, very introverted, so I don't really like to put my life out there. Like, I'm the kind of person when I'm in a relationship, they'll be dating me for like 2 or 3 years before I even mention them to my family, because in our family, they're very important to me. So the things I choose to share, I want them to be permanent things. So putting my life out in the open like that, coming from putting nothing out in the open, was super scary. But Judy is someone I looked up to my entire life. I idolized her, and finally it gave me, and Bella, I think she'll say the same thing, the opportunity to finally rejoin our family, since I was living in California for around 6 or 7 years or so for college. And just like being out in the open for the show, she gave me really similar advice in my life as well. So I kind of was taking a journey in my life to be more open, as well as, doing it on camera on the open. So I was doing it kind of in parallel. So it was scary, but definitely rewarding.
And for me, I would have to agree with Kim in the sense that being a part of the Ho family, we care so much about each other and about their opinions and how they feel. So it's really hard to put myself out there, but I enjoy it because it's with my family. And I remember like asking my older cousins, like, oh, what is it like to film? And like, what did you feel? And how does it feel now that your first season has aired? And honestly, they just kind of all told me that it's hard to put into words. You just kind of have to go through it and how you deal with it. But being with my family makes everything that much better, and it makes it so much easier. And after filming season 2, what I learned is to have boundaries, even though we are putting our lives out there, to have boundaries and to always like respect yourself and your time and just like your mental health at the end of the day. Because I feel like before this, I did not know how to do that very well.
I mean, do you feel like for all of you, I mean, you're so open and vulnerable in the show in all of the things and the personal journeys that you've been going on over the last few years that you've shared in these first 2 seasons, but at the same time, with what Bella was saying about having boundaries, it is so important to still have those private moments for yourselves, individually and as a family. And so do you feel like for all of you, it's been a little bit of a journey in kind of figuring out where those lines are for you in making a show for the first time?
For me, very much so. I really do think of this show as, a job, and my job is to share what I'm going through within my life. But I know that what is shown and what happens in real life, it's just a very small slice of what is going on. I mean, they show 30-minute episodes. That's hours and days and a week of filming. So there's no way that everything can be captured. So I know my truth. And that's all that matters to me. And however that may be perceived by others and their judgments mean much less to me as long as I know my truth.
I really love that. And also wanted to ask you all a bit about some of the logistical elements of the filming as well, because, like Judy was just saying, they're filming certain segments and obviously not everything into a half-hour episode. And, if we look at the structure of this season, we've seen you, Judy, go from going through IVF to, becoming pregnant and going into a marriage. And so that's all over the course for all of you, several months in your lives. And yet, the cameras are kind of dipping in and out at different moments. And so I was interested in logistically what that looks like in terms of the scheduling and how that comes together, particularly mapping out what are going to be some potentially important moments for them to come and capture, like you all celebrating the new year, which is obviously going to bring all of the family together, and some of the other, things that are important to all of you that you really want them to be there for.
Well, for Lunar New Year, that was, filmed in real time. That was a celebration during February, the traditional month that we celebrate Lunar New Year. For other things that are going on with our lives, it just so happens that, they're here when these things are really happening. So it's easy for us to talk about. If there is something that's happened in the past or we're contemplating in the future, it's brought up and, during interviews, and it's something we speak about. And if anything, I feel like it's brought our family closer. There's nothing that the producers are afraid to ask about, and it's all out there.
I love that, and obviously there's elements of the cameras being there in your homes, but also you're sitting down for interviews with them as well for talking headpieces to camera, and that must have kind of evolved a little bit going into the second season for those of you who've been doing it for 2 seasons. But at a certain point for all of you has been a new experience in creating the show and kind of sitting down and figuring out that dynamic. It's not quite the same flow as a normal conversation because we're not hearing their questions. You're having to kind of make sure that you give certain context in the way that you answer. And so for all of you, what has that journey been like in terms of just navigating and feeling very comfortable and kind of learning that side of what this, like Judy was describing as a job, of what this job is in essence?
Who wants to go first?
You guys go. I've been talking this whole time.
Okay.
Well, you can go first.
No, Kim, go.
Well, one thing I learned just from production and logistics in general is that there's a lot of people, a lot of staff, a lot of talent that goes into it. And I'm very grateful to have met all the people on set to have helped create the show in general. Even though I'm making like raw, real-time memories with my family, there's going to be a ton of cameras in their faces. And then there might be like putting in a lot of work, like standing in a bathtub, which is not the most comfortable spot to be standing in. So it's very interesting to see all the work that goes into it. So it makes me appreciate reality TV a lot more. I usually just used to watch it just for fun, but just to see how hard people work, both on the front and the back of the camera to make it happen is something that I've become more appreciative of, in terms of like rewording certain things, because obviously you don't want to drone on and on forever to make it in the context. It was definitely a little bit difficult at first because I like to ramble a lot because I don't really have a filter and it just kind of all comes out there. But after a while, I guess, of just doing it, like experiencing it real time, I kind of just naturally adapted to it and made my sentences shorter, and then remembered to like put the question like in my answer instead of, going back and taking a bunch of takes.
And I think like interviews was actually the hardest part for me because at least in person, I have someone else there that I can talk to, but interviews is the most unnatural thing ever. And there's this like little alien that they draw on the camera, and I'm always forgetting to look at it. Like I always forget that I should be looking here, but like answering the questions. And it was really tricky for me to get used to too. And sometimes, like you were saying, the context of like you have to give a little background before you answer a question. And I think over time you just get used to it. Like as when I asked my cousins before, they just said like you just get thrown in there and you get used to it. And that's how I just adapted to it too.
And for you, Lesley, has there been a little bit of a shift kind of going into the second season with that? Because obviously in the first season, it was, explaining who everybody in the family is, giving a lot more background. And at this point, people know a little bit about you and your life. And so has that changed the dynamic of doing those interviews? And does it feel a little bit more comfortable second season versus first season?
Oh, absolutely. You're used to the cameras. It takes a while. I think it takes like the first or second week to get used to having cameras in your face all the time. And then I think after they leave, you have a little bit of PTSD because it's so quiet in the house, because they come like 2 hours before we're supposed to shoot to set up lighting. Lighting takes longer than it takes to shoot any scenes. So after they leave, it's so quiet, and that Wash and I we just kind of stare at each other for a while. We're not used to being alone in the house for this long. It's 3 months. But I mean, season 2, I definitely, was more used to the cameras. I wasn't going through something so heavy at the time, and I was more like YOLO, whatever happens, happens. I felt like I was more free, no filter. I think they bleeped a couple of things out. So I was wild and free second season.
And in Washington, I actually love that admission at the beginning when you're on camera being interviewed in the second season, where you kind of say, oh, actually, this is a lot more fun doing this sober at this point. And so I was interested in how that felt a little bit different, because you've been so open in terms of the vulnerability that's come with all of that as well.
Yeah, being, sober and being filmed and being in a confessional is totally different. You know, can't really see yourself. You can only be open and honest. But I've always, you know, it's fun. You know, the fun parts are when we're filming at different locations around Houston, and you've got all this gear on, and you've got 50 people in production, and you know, putting Houston on the map is really important to me, and putting other entrepreneurs. I've had a good time throughout the whole thing. You know, it's been not easy to be sober through this journey. It's in front of the world, but I know I've changed some lives. I've definitely changed, you know, my own life, and I'm very proud of that.
That's so great. And Judy, I wanted to talk about Nate a little bit because, you know, in talking about the show, I know that you've mentioned that this is really something where he's there in support of you, you know, and he even has to take time off of work often in order to come in and be there for filming. And so how do the two of you kind of navigate together where you're going to be able to find that time within your relationship? Because going back to what you were saying earlier, you still want to have time by yourselves, you know, but then there is the show happening at the same time and all of that coming together. And so how do the two of you kind of navigate that space with one another?
You know, for season 1, me and Nate had just started dating, and he didn't want to be a part of the show because he's like, oh, I'm a doctor. I don't want my patients to see me like out and about in my personal life. But the producers had told him, like, if you're not in the show, then it's going to be Judy, like, living the single life. So that's how he got signed on. And then for season 2, he was going through a much darker time in his life, so he doesn't appear as much. You know, most of the time it's me out there with my family. But you know, season 2, we do meet his sisters who become Van and Tam. They become part of the show, and I think you just see how both sides, the Ho family, the Wynn family, really unite and bond and support Nate.
And Bella and Kim, you know, you were talking a little bit at the beginning about, you know, that idea of coming into the show, and what have you found has been the difference in terms of the expectation of what you thought it would be like, you talking to your family, having watched the first season versus the reality of what the experience of making the show has actually been like for both of you?
Like Kim was saying earlier, the whole logistics that goes into filming the show, I did not know that it was that complicated. And I think like one of the first scenes, I was sitting in the back watching May like direct all the cameramen, like, oh, we need the camera over here, this camera over there, like this angle, like zoom in, zoom out. And I'm like, I did not know that there was that much effort and work into it. And that's why I appreciate the entire staff and team so much, because they just did so much, and they sat there and watched us cry all these times and just like be there for us. And it was just a really amazing experience that I could say is definitely once in a lifetime, and not many people get to have. So I would not have like rather had that experience with anyone else besides my entire family.
I agree. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity. Not everyone can say they've done something like this, especially for someone who's super private. If I'm going to put my whole life out there, it's going to be with people I'm comfortable with, and who better to do it with than my family. As a family, you know, we try to make an excuse to see each other like for every holiday, even the most random ones. Like it would be like Labor Day. Oh, we got to go all meet up at like our grandpa's cemetery, and then like, you know, just hang out together and then go to someone's house after. But the show has not only given us the opportunity to spend time together, but spend extra more time together, because now like we'll just like drive all the way up to Lesley's house, which is like 5 minutes away, and be like, hey, just walk straight in and be like, what are you doing? Like, let's just hang out right now. And we've gotten super close to where, like I was saying before, I idolized Wash and Judy growing up. They were, you know, they were just so unattainable and they were so far away. But now I can spend time with them as friends, and we can talk to each other about just life instead of just me looking up to her and being like, I just want to be just like her. So something I really appreciate a lot.
You can still do all of that. And Judy, I feel like I've heard you mention that one of the things in the first season was, in essence, not really knowing if people were really going to be watching the show and not thinking about it in that way. And so how did that shift things in terms of making the second season and just having that awareness of, you know, people knowing aspects of your lives and coming in with that context for you, and knowing that the things that you were filming that people would be responding to?
Yeah, when we filmed in 2019, HBO Max, it didn't even exist, right? Like, and then by the time we started filming the second season, they had the second iteration of Sex and the City, and I was like, oh, this streaming network's a big deal now. Now a lot of people are watching it. It made me filter a little bit more. I put a lot more thought during interviews, like, oh, this is going to sound, a certain way. This could probably be edited. It made me a little bit more nervous because so many more people were going to see it. But after a few weeks, it's hard to keep thinking about what you're saying. And by that point, you're just like, all right, I'm just going to let it all out.
And for you, Lesley, in Washington, I was interested in the same thing as well, especially in terms of the fact that you have shared so many things in terms of the vulnerabilities and the fact that marriages really do take consistent work. And with what Washington was saying as well, through a journey in sobriety and knowing at this point that really has touched and changed other people's lives. What was that like in going into another season of this show and knowing that you opening up in that way was really having the impact that it was and really changing other people's lives and worlds as you were coming into filming a second season, still continuing on this journey together?
For me, I feel like, I've had a lot of DMs where people are going through marriage situations or situations similar to mine. They also married a party boy. Their husbands go crazy every night. And, lots of stories. And I don't think I realized the impact that season 1 made. I felt like it was just, I was so in my own world and so consumed with my own feelings that I wasn't aware of the outside. I was barely aware of cameras, let alone, millions of viewers. So I think season 2, I feel like with that in the back of my mind, we have shown a little more depth into the marriage, just how we're working through things together, sobriety as a journey for both of us, not just Washington, and the support that I try to provide for him. So.
For me, season 1, I didn't even know what vulnerability meant. I'm Asian and growing up, we're taught not to be vulnerable. And so when the producers asked me to be vulnerable and, my sister and my wife wanted me to share my vulnerability, I was totally against it. I was like, oh my God, are you crazy? Like, why do y'all want to make me look like that? But the truth will set you free, and it's not always easy as an alcoholic or an addict. Like, we try to, I'm learning to, draw my boundaries and protect my boundaries. And that's something that comes with confidence, and each day that I do win against this powerful disease that affects many people around the world, I know that by sharing my truth, that some of us can relate to me. And if I can save more marriages, that's great. And so I'm just glad that, we're still married and we're working on our truth. She's happier than she's ever been, and we're going to have more hosts.
I love it. And Lesley was talking a little bit earlier about what it's like when the crew actually show up and when they start kind of coming in with all the equipment, when they're setting everything up. And so I wanted to ask you all a little bit about what that looks like in terms of filming days and what the difference is in interview days versus when the crew are there, and the type of space that they try to really create for you, because obviously so much of the show really is about creating these authentic moments, but also there is that kind of awareness probably at the back of your minds of there's a camera crew there, but I know that they do a lot of conscientious things like trying to keep themselves a little bit more scarce, like putting shoe covers on to make sure that they're not scuffing up the floors with all these people coming in and out of your homes. And so what does a lot of that look like behind the scenes?
It's like, a group of passionate artists working together as a team. And, from season 1 to season 2, you definitely know this is an HBO Max TV show just by the quality of people that they have, the team that they have, the equipment that they use, the organization that is put into every single, piece of scene work. The storytelling is authentic, it's original, and I can't wait to see everybody on August 25th. it's beautiful.
Yeah, they're very mindful of our homes, and that, this is where we live with our children. They wear the shoe coverings. They make sure that they leave it exactly the way it was when they come in the mornings, and they always make sure it's clean. And I think more than that, I think that, everyone is always so positive. They always want to keep us in the right frame of mind when we're filming. They try to not like put us in a negative headspace. They don't want us to worry about anything. So whatever we need to eat or drink to make us as comfortable as possible, especially during interviews. They try to be as accommodating as possible to make our job easier. And in return, we hope that, we deliver and we make their jobs easier as well.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, honestly, I feel like everyone is a part of our family, and they really do everything that they can to make you feel comfortable. But also, like, when there are some really tough scenes, they're like sitting there, like having to hold the camera and sit there and watch us cry, but like not feel anything. But afterwards, like someone will always come up to me and just be like, oh, like I really appreciated you sharing that. Or like, like, thank you for that. Like, it was really great to hear you say that. And I've never had anyone like say anything negative, and everyone has always just been so comforting. Like they were like, another cousin or something that's just there for me while I'm sitting there like crying my eyes out.
And
I love
like
that,
just to add on to Bella really quick, like just like as they're part of our family, they're their own family as well. They work so well together and they respect each other. A lot of, for example, when Bella was mentioning May before, she was like directing all the cameras. A lot of the camera crew had actually followed her from a previous show. And like after talking to a lot of the staff there, a lot of them have done projects together, and then like they told each other about the project. So like it's not like something where at the end of season 2 they part ways and they never see each other again. They always keep close in touch. And I think that level of camaraderie is something that I didn't realize was in the entertainment industry since I'm really new to it. And it's again, even more admirable to see all the work and like the love they have for not only us, like the people in front of the camera, but for each other behind the camera.
Absolutely. One of the things that must be really special about making a show like this together as a family is that people mostly have home videos from when they're kids and when they're growing up, but as adults, it's not really something that we have as much. And yet you now all have, essentially these very high production home videos of really, touching moments and important moments in all of your lives. And so for each of you, I kind of wanted to individually come to all of you and ask about what's a particular moment in the show that you're really grateful that there's been an opportunity to capture, or something that you're really proud of having had the opportunity to talk about or create a dialogue out around the show. And I'm going to come to you first, Judy.
I think for me, it was just season 1, just when I watched it back, and I was going through a divorce, and my mindset at that time was just like, oh, I'm just trying to find myself again. And then when I watch all the episodes and it's, watching the love story of me and Nate, it makes me believe in love again. And at that point in my life, I just thought, oh, I'll never, find love again. And it was just, like my happily ever after is documented. And I hope that one day, our son can watch that and see how much love he came from.
And for you, Lesley?
Wash and I actually watched a little bit of season 1 the other night. And we were watching Little Roosevelt, Little Lincoln. There's, from 3 years ago. Oh my gosh. And just like Lunar New Year's and the traditions that I, teach them every year, the Vietnamese language, the customs, the traditional gowns that I put them in. I document on my phone, but to actually see it just come to life and how little they were, I'm so glad that was documented. We actually talked about that.
What about for you, Washington?
I think, and I think most people know, I wasn't, the perfect son. So I've given my dad a ton of, stress throughout my 40 years. But, he's so proud that he has a, high production family heirloom that will live on forever. And the proudest thing for me is to help celebrate his legacy and his hard work, and my mother's and our Vietnamese culture and tradition and to show the mainstream audiences how we live as a Vietnamese family. And so that's what I'm really proud about.
Absolutely. And how about for you, Bella?
Honestly, everything has been really great, but one of the most memorable times for me was like the first few weeks of filming. We got to film Judy's like tea ceremony, and there's just so many things about that event that were really important to me. The fact that I've only been back in Houston for a couple of months now, and I got to share something so meaningful with my family. And I've never been a part of a wedding before, so that was the first time. And to be a part of Judy's like tea ceremony was amazing. And the fact that it was also to share our culture, it's something that we really cherish in our Vietnamese community. And being there and enjoying it and crying in the morning, crying at night. I feel like I'm talking about crying a lot, but it was just very emotional for me to be back with my family again.
And then last but not least, how about for you, Kim?
I think like everyone has been saying, representation is super important, whether it's for like a trivial problem, like an everyday problem that you experience versus, I mean, a larger scale problem like that a lot of AAPI people face in their, in their daily lives. But one of the most memorable scenes is just being able to capture the raw moments where I'm talking to, Judy and Lesley, and they're just giving me advice about life. Obviously, I can replay them in my head, but I can never be able to replay them like for memory. And just to go back and listen to how they feel and watching them, cry for me, something that, Judy especially doesn't do. She doesn't hug, like just be able to capture moments like that, which I would have never imagined that would happen before. And just going back to be able to like see them again and again and again is just so, it's just so amazing. Like, watching Judy cry for me, I know that sounds kind of weird and really trivial, but like I said before, like I used to worship the floor that Judy like walked on, and just to see how much she cared for me and to replay that moment over and over again is, it's priceless. You can't replicate that.
I think a huge reason for the show's success from the first season is just the way that you also authentically share in such vulnerable ways on the show. So really appreciate everything that you've done in the first 2 seasons of this series, and appreciate you all talking about a lot of the elements that go into making it. It's so fascinating to hear. So thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
Having us.